15 years ago, something happened in one of my friendship groups. Someone did something that was quite duplicitous and had me questioning whether the friendship was genuine. I happen to know that everyone agreed that what had happened was not okay. So I did what to me was natural and only right. Open communication. So I raised it and was honest with her. I respectfully said, hey, this is how I received what you did. And the second I said it out loud, she had a very extreme reaction that I wasn't expecting. Rather than listen to what I said and take it on board, she sort of assumed this victim role. And what happens when someone portrays themselves as a hard-done-by victim? People instinctively run to protect and comfort them. So the group started to soothe her, and I became the villain in a situation where days before, others could see my perspective. Suddenly, the story became I was the harsh one, I was mean, I was the problem. And she never had a conversation with me about what her issues were. Over 15 years later, she is still playing that victim role. And the others in that group are still seeing me through the lens of that one moment. For years, I carried guilt and shame for simply being honest. I replayed the conversation in my head over and over again. I asked myself, should I have just kept quiet? Is this what happens when you raise a problem? Is this what happens when you share how you feel? And that's when I realized something important. We have been sold a lie. Society tells you that fitting in is the superior virtue. It says go along to get along, appease everyone. Honesty, even when said kindly, disrupts the peace, so don't do it. And if you don't play that game, it makes you pay a price. You become difficult, too sensitive, too honest. So at some point, many of us make a quiet trade. We swap being people of conviction for being people who are addicted to external validation and approval. But nobody tells you that that also comes with a cost. And that cost is much higher because the cost of seeking external validation at all costs is you. If you're a perfectionist or an overachiever, you probably know that tension very well. On the one hand, you're probably someone of conviction who has clear standards for yourself. You care deeply, and you probably have strong values or principles. On the other hand, you live in social systems such as workplaces, families, cultures, friendship groups that reward you for smoothing your edges, shrinking your opinions, and being easy to manage. So you start to feel this split. Do I honor what I actually believe? Or do I say and do what will get me approval, praise, and belonging? And slowly, without realizing and really noticing, you become someone who needs external validation in order to feel safe, to feel worthy, and to feel like you're doing well in life. Some don't even notice they've made this trade anymore. But for those of you who do notice it, it creates this constant unease, a very quiet grief, a sense that you're abandoning yourself and you don't quite know how to stop. From a young age, I was that child who had clear and strong convictions, which meant I believed in what I believed in. Where those strong beliefs came from, I don't know. But if an adult did something clearly wrong, I would tell them. Not because I was trying to be rebellious, but because I genuinely thought, but that's not good. Looking back, I can see that my convictions were a coping mechanism. I didn't have the easiest childhood, and developing a strong internal compass was how I made sense of the world and stayed grounded. But here's the catch. You can be a person of conviction and still be at war with yourself about it. For a long time, I was uneasy about my own backbone. I beat myself up for having it and even tried to get rid of it. I would think, why can't I just say nothing and let things slide like everyone else? So instead of enjoying the benefits of having strong values and having courage, I spent years trying to earn approval from people who didn't even have a clear compass of their own. I did this in friendships, I did this in corporate roles, where you're often told explicitly and implicitly to conform in order to move forward. And it took me years to realize the goal is not just to become someone who doesn't depend on external validation. The goal is to become someone who is at peace with that too. Before we move into the how to stop seeking external validation, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been honest about something, about your needs, about someone's behavior, about what you believe, and been made the bad guy for it? Or did you hold back because you feared you would lose other people's validation? If you're comfortable, please share a tiny version of the story in the comments. I'd love to talk to you about it. So how do you actually stop outsourcing your self-worth to other people's reactions and validation? I developed a strategy called Home Heart History, which consists of 3 key parts that have transformed things for me and my clients. Home is about building an inner world. Heart is where you choose what you love more than approval, such as your values, calling, or impact, for instance. History, the third and final one, is to remember what you've overcome and stand on that, using it to tell a new story about your identity and the world around you. So let's start with home, building your inner world. We live in a world that is obsessed with keeping your attention outward, whether it's your phone notifications, your performance reviews, social media likes, comments, things you do to be liked by friendship groups. There is always something telling you who you should be. Now, to be clear, external validation is a signal that we belong, that we're loved, or that we matter. So it's human nature to desire it, but it's an illusion, because you cannot build your life on other people's unstable opinions and judgments, which are so often shaped by their own insecurities and fears anyway. Research shows that about 95% of people think they're self-aware, but when you actually measure it, only 10 to 15% are. That means there's a good chance you're looking for validation from people who aren't even clear on who they are themselves. So how on earth could they ever accurately validate you? One of the ways I help my clients stop chasing external validation is by getting them to think of their inner world as a home you build for yourself. Somewhere you can always return to for rest and belonging, a place where your self-worth actually lives. But instead, many of us never really live there. We unknowingly leave our home and go outside, asking other people to decide whether we're allowed to feel approved of. For perfectionists, that often takes the shape of how well you perform and live up to your impossible standards. But for all of us, when our sense of worth depends on other people's reactions, we end up quietly rejecting and abandoning ourselves. And if you're rejecting yourself, how can you expect anyone else to truly accept you? Continuing with this idea of your inner world as a home you build for yourself, imagine what would happen if you didn't have a physical home to live in. Just imagine. Well, firstly, you'd be far more vulnerable and exposed to the harsh elements outside. You'd be reliant on wherever you could find shelter, which would make you desperate at times and potentially taken advantage of and without security because you can't close your own door. That's exactly what it's like when you don't have a solid inner world. You're emotionally homeless. And if that's how you feel right now, you're not alone. Most people feel this way. They're just very good at hiding it. And it's not your fault either. We live in a world that makes it hard to build an inner world and stay true to it no matter what. So let's start building a home. I'm going to ask you 5 questions that you'd normally consider about a physical house, but each one is really about your inner world, about what comes in, what happens inside, and who gets access. So the first question is, what is the culture of your home? Every home, whether healthy or unhealthy, has a culture. And as someone who has led culture change projects for global organizations, culture in organizational psychology is quite simply described as the way we do things around here. Or in other words, the spoken and unspoken beliefs and rules that shape behaviors, practices, and decisions. In my inner world, one of the cultural pillars is we do not knowingly abandon our values and convictions for external validation. And if we mess up because we're human, we acknowledge it once we become aware of it and move forward, taking the lesson along. Another one is around here, we can be wrong and still be completely and fully loved for who we are. What are the non-negotiables that shape the culture of your home, of your inner world? What are the hidden and unhidden beliefs that drive your behaviors? Because if you don't define them, you'll just absorb whatever culture is loudest around you externally. In keeping with the analogy of your inner world as a home that you're building for yourself, here's the next question. Who is allowed in. Not everyone gets access to your inner world. Some people only get the front porch. And there are people whose opinion should not be allowed to rearrange the furniture in your mind. Ask yourself, does this person have their own compass? Have they earned the right to speak into how I see myself or what my inner culture should be? If the answer is no, them not validating you or criticizing you might still sting because you're human, but it doesn't get to be the architect of your self-worth. If your inner world is a home, the people you allow in matters, but so does the atmosphere. And a huge part of that is the kind of conversations that happen there. They really do dictate the atmosphere of a home. So question 3 is, what kinds of conversations happen there and what actually gets expressed? This is about what you say to yourself and how you say it. An inner home that is safe and inviting requires a shift in your inner dialogue. You don't have to descend into fake positivity, but because you've put all this energy and belief into harsh self-criticism, why not transfer that energy into something that builds, not destroys? You need to talk to yourself like someone you intend to live with for the rest of your life. If your inner world is a home, the people and conversations matter, but so do the reminders you surround yourself with every day. When you walk into a home, what's on the walls tells you the story of what people want to be reminded of. So they intentionally make those things visible. In your inner world or your inner home, what do you deliberately want to remember? And how do you make it very visible to yourself? Just like hanging pictures up on the wall. Could it be a reminder of new habits or beliefs you want to adopt? Things you've overcome or want to challenge yourself to overcome? Could it be truths that you want to live by? Most of us let our mental walls get covered and cluttered in the worst moments. The time you embarrassed yourself in a meeting, the friendship that broke up, a rejection you experienced, or the comment that someone made about you that was unkind 10 years ago. Yet you don't hang up pictures and memories of these things in your physical home because that doesn't foster safety. It doesn't foster warmth or belonging. So why do we do it to ourselves and to our minds? Even if your walls are covered in these things, you are allowed to and can redecorate. In the comments, tell me, what's one thing you'd like to hang on the walls of your inner world this week? How will you make it visible to yourself? It could be a phrase, a memory, a truth. I'd love to see them. So that's what you choose to see on the walls of your inner home. Now let's look at what you're taking in. What are you feeding yourself there? A big part of a home is what we eat there. So in the same way, what are you consuming? From a physical perspective, are you fueling your body in a way that makes it a safe and inviting place for you? What content are you eating? Is it constantly telling you that you're not enough or that you're behind? And spiritually or emotionally, what practices do you engage in to help you feel grounded, connected and loved, regardless of your performance? If your diet is mostly criticism, comparison, or chaos, your inner world will always feel unsafe, and you'll keep going outside to look for external validation. The final thing to consider is, how is trust maintained in your home? Because the fastest way to feel unsafe inside yourself is to constantly abandon your own word and go back on what you said. And this links back to what I said earlier about conviction. You can't build a life of conviction on a foundation of self-betrayal. For example, if you promise yourself rest, but then bulldoze over it every time someone asks you for something, or if you promise yourself that you'll be honest about something, but then immediately pretend you're fine just to keep the peace, your inner home learns, I cannot trust myself to protect me. But again, we are human, and this is bound to happen. But we can rebuild that trust over time through small, consistent commitments that you keep, even when it annoys other people or it means they won't approve of you. That could look like deciding you will leave the office on time at least once this week, or deciding that you will say, I need to think about it, instead of automatically saying yes all the time. Every time you follow through on one of those small promises, you're teaching your inner world that you're safe there and that it can be trusted. When you cultivate your inner world like a home, you become less reliant on the weather outside. The external world might still be unpredictable, but you still have somewhere to return, somewhere that loves you. with proper insulation and security in place. Most people are walking around emotionally homeless, with nowhere to return to except what the external world has for them, which is often more work, more achievement, more scrolling, and more social media likes. But the external does not always love you and is often full of other emotionally homeless people that are seeking too. So how can it be a stable place for you to live? You are allowed to build a home for yourself. So let me ask you something that's critical to reflect on. What price have you been paying for external validation? Has it cost you creating your own inner world of safety and belonging? And is it worth it? Do you actually want to keep paying that price? So, once you've started to rebuild your inner world like a home and see the real cost of chasing approval, the next step is to decide what you actually want your life to revolve around instead. I describe this as finding something you love more than external validation, something that matters more to you. For me, one of the things that started to matter more than being liked and having external validation was living in alignment with my values and my strengths. My top strengths include courage, developing others, compassion, leading, and critical thinking. If I compromise my inner world and those strengths to get validation from people who are seeking external validation themselves, I limit my ability to actually contribute, to live purposefully, to do the work I'm here to do. When we seek external validation from others at all costs, we slowly erode the very things that make us unique, that make us who we are. So I fell in love with alignment and purpose more than I loved being seen as nice or acceptable according to other people's labels and definitions. And that doesn't mean I don't care about people. It's quite the opposite. I deeply do. And that's why I do this work. But it means I refuse to make other people's validation the gatekeeper to how I spend my time on this earth while I'm here. If this is resonating, I discuss things like this in my private newsletter community, Excellence and Ease. It's a monthly letter that I write for perfectionists and overachievers who want to do meaningful work without abandoning themselves. You can join using the link in the description box below. Let's bring this home with the final part of this shift to release yourself from external validation. Number 3 is to stand on what you've overcome, using it to tell a new story about your identity and the world, but also your blind spots. This is about remembering what you've already lived through and to stand on it as a constant reminder of your strength and evidence of your ability to withstand future obstacles, including moments when people may not validate or accept you. When I say overcome, I don't just mean that a lot of time has passed since it happened, which is often the way a lot of people talk about it. What I mean by overcoming is how you've used that experience as a building block to become more aligned with who you really are, or to learn lessons that genuinely increase the wisdom behind the actions you take. For me, there are so many moments in my life where on paper, I should have become more bitter, more guarded, more performative. I've had my character mislabeled. I've been punished for telling the truth. But when I look at my life now, I can confidently say I do not look or act like what I've been through. Now be careful here, because this is not about arrogance or superiority. It's about something way more important. Letting what you've survived empower you. Think of it as gathering what's left after the battles you've already fought. Not to keep living in the war zone, but to strengthen your armor and remind you what you're capable of. I love it when Brianna West writes in her book, The Mountain Is You, that the mountains in life don't disappear. You become the person who can climb it. Standing on what you've overcome is how you remember that you have become a person who can climb those mountains, someone who can survive any lack of external validation. The problem is that we either forget this or we use our past as a reason to become less of who we are, letting it steal our future. But you get to choose differently. A really simple and useful practice related to this is to write down 3 things you've overcome that are not visibly obvious by looking at you or upon meeting you. And then ask, what does this tell me about what I have the capacity and capability to withstand in the future. Suddenly, a lack of external validation from a bunch of people begins to pale in comparison. Those are the stories you should be hanging on your inner walls too. Another key element to this part is getting really honest about your blind spots and weaknesses. When you're clear on them and refuse to make them a verdict on your worth, you protect yourself from our social systems or others who may knowingly or unknowingly use them against you. I had to get comfortable and aware of mine, but getting comfortable with them means no one can tell me that because of them, I don't deserve love or belonging. It means I believe that despite these limitations, look what I've healed from and will continue to do so. Look at how self-aware I'm becoming. Look at how I can still love myself fully, including the parts of me that are in progress. The truth is, most people are themselves desperately seeking external validation. They are unsure, they're unsteady, often externally impressive by social metrics, job titles, money, followers, but you have no idea what their inner world looks like. You don't know whether they have an internal home to go back to, and whether it is in fact external validation that's motivating all their actions, achievements, and decisions. So why would their opinion carry more authority than your lived experience, your values, and your growth? Let's just be really clear about something though. Releasing external validation does not mean you will never again feel that sting when someone disapproves of you or rejects you. You may still feel fear. You may still have moments of, oh no, what are they going to think of me? This is all human. The difference is what you do next. When fear shows up, there are three things I come back to. The first thing is I return home. I go back to my inner world. What practices could help you with that? For me, it's quiet time, it's prayer, journaling, going for a walk and talking to someone that I trust, that has compassion. I also go back to looking at what's hanging on my walls. In other words, I look at my critical reminders, the truths, beliefs, and rules that I tell myself, like the rules of my inner culture that we discussed earlier. The second thing I do is I name the feeling behind the desire for that external validation, and I weigh it against what I love more. So it could be that this is fear that's behind the desire for external validation, or shame. I might say this is the old pattern of, if they're not pleased with me, I'm not safe. When you name it, you expose it. And then I hold that feeling up against what I love more. And then I ask, do I love fear and shame more than living a life in alignment with my strengths and values? Let your next action be driven by what you love more, not by the feeling that is shouting the loudest. Sometimes that next action is a repair conversation. Sometimes it's deciding on a boundary. Other times it's doing nothing and letting people be wrong about you. But this way I choose. I choose from alignment, not from panic or desperation. The last thing I do is I remember what I've overcome already. I remember a line I heard in a TED Talk last year that stayed with me. And the line was, remember, you are nobody's prey. You are not at the mercy of other people's approval. No one else gets to be the gatekeeper of your self-worth unless you hand them the keys to it. I'm not saying you can't ever enjoy a compliment. It's just that external validation cannot be the landlord of your self-worth. At most, it's a nice visitor in the home you've built for yourself, not the person who owns the deed or the land your home is built on. You can care about people, be open to feedback, and still refuse to sacrifice your entire sense of self on the altar of other people's verdicts about your worth. You are not prey. You are a person with values, a history, strengths, weaknesses, and a calling that is bigger than whoever happens to approve of you this week. So I want to leave you with two questions. What's one thing you're going to do this week to build your inner home or your inner world? What's one thing you love more than other people's approval? Let me know your answers in the comments below. I read every single one and I love speaking with you. But until then, I want to leave you with a quote I saw the other week online by someone called Natalie Elizabeth Ellis. She said, "There will be a moment you see how much your life was built to please others. It's very important to burn it all down and rebuild it for yourself. I'll see you in the next one.